She was at her best friend's birthday party when she realized it. Amidst the birthday wishes, laughter, and photos that would be posted minutes later, a strange feeling pierced her chest like a silent blade. She looked around, all those people, the warm hugs, the lively conversations, and then felt completely invisible. Not because they ignored her, but because no one there, not even the birthday girl she had known for 15 years, had the slightest idea who she really was. And worse, she didn't know either. There is a loneliness that cannot be cured by company. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people and realizing that you are fundamentally alone. Not alone in the romantic sense of having no one around, but alone in the most existential and frightening sense of the word. No one really knows you, and maybe you've never really been loved. Not in the way you imagined, not in the way you were promised. We spend our entire lives building relationships, accumulating contacts, cultivating friendships, creating family ties. But there is something disturbing going on beneath all this social architecture. An insurmountable distance between who you are and what others see, between who you are and who you can show, between the person who inhabits your body and the image you project to the world. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who dedicated his life to mapping the invisible human psyche, made a discovery that should keep us awake at night. Genuine human relationships are almost impossible, not because people are bad, not because the world is cruel, but because there are a series of psychological mechanisms operating within us, completely outside our consciousness, that prevent us from knowing ourselves and consequently from knowing anyone else. Think about your closest relationships. That childhood friend, that sibling, that partner who sleeps beside you. How much of what you show these people is really you? How much is performance, social protocol, need for approval? And more importantly, how much of what you hide from them do you also hide from yourself? Jung realized something that most people spend their lives avoiding. We are strangers to ourselves. We carry within us desires we don't recognize, fears we don't name, impulses we deny so strongly that they become invisible. And so we go out into the world trying to connect with other people. But how can you show who you are if you don't know yourself? The pain you feel is not weakness. It is not excessive sensitivity. It is not modern fussiness. It is the pain of realizing, even if unconsciously, that something fundamental is wrong in your relationships, that there is a performance going on all the time, that you're tired of pretending but you don't know how to stop, that you're surrounded by people who say they love you but who only love the edited version of you that you can present. And here's the most disturbing part. They're pretending too. Everyone is. Not out of malice, not out of conscious strategy, but because we've been conditioned since childhood to hide parts of ourselves in order to be accepted. We learn that some emotions are unacceptable, some thoughts are shameful, some desires need to be repressed. And so we construct a presentable version of ourselves and spend our lives defending that construction as if it were our real identity. Jung called this construction a persona, the mask you wear to navigate the social world. And the problem isn't wearing the mask. The problem is that most people wear the mask for so long that they forget they are wearing it. The mask becomes the face, and then you start to believe that you are what you pretend to be. And worse, you demand that others also wear their masks, because seeing someone without a mask would be too scary, too revealing, too confrontational. So what happens? You have relationships between masks. You fall in love with someone's persona. You befriend a person's social performance. You build an entire family based on edited versions of human beings. And deep down, somewhere quiet and dark in your consciousness, you know, this isn't real love. This isn't true connection. But to admit that would be to admit that you've spent years, maybe decades, investing in fundamentally false relationships. It would be to admit that the people you love may not really know you. It would be to admit that you don't know them either. And worst of all, it would be to admit that you don't even know yourself. It's easier to continue the charade. It's easier to pretend that everything is fine, that the relationships are deep, that the love is real, because the alternative, looking into the abyss of structural loneliness that inhabits us, is too terrifying. But Jung doesn't let you escape, because if the persona is only the beginning of our relational blindness, what comes next is even more disturbing. The first time you wore the mask, it was for survival. Maybe you were 5 or 6 years old. Maybe you realized that when you cried too much, it bothered people. That when you got angry, you were called difficult. That when you were too authentic, people walked away. So you learned, there are parts of me that are acceptable, and there are parts that need to be hidden. This was not a conscious choice. It was an automatic adjustment to the environment. Jung understood the persona as an evolutionary necessity. We need social masks to navigate complex hierarchies, avoid conflict, and belong to groups. Children who do not learn to modulate their behavior according to the social context suffer real consequences: rejection, punishment, isolation. It is a matter of emotional survival. So you built your first mask, and it worked. People liked the edited version of you. They gave you approval, affection, belonging. And your brain recorded this information as a fundamental learning. This version of me is safe. This version of me is lovable. Keep this version. The problem is that no one warned you that the mask has an emotional expiration date. No one told you that wearing the persona for too long creates a dangerous internal dissociation. You start to forget where the performance ends and the real you begins. The line that separated who you are from who you pretend to be fades away, blurring, until you can no longer distinguish one from the other. Jung called this persona inflation, when the mask becomes so dominant that you lose touch with every other part of yourself. Think of the coworker who is always friendly, always available, always positive, always helpful. She smiles when she is overwhelmed. She agrees when she disagrees. She says, "Sure, no problem," when she really wants to scream no. This performative friendliness is not genuine kindness. It is a mask so well glued on that she herself no longer realizes she is wearing it. And when someone asks for authenticity, when someone asks, "But how are you really?" she doesn't know how to respond. She gets confused, almost offended, because she is friendliness. The mask has become her identity. Removing the mask would be like tearing off her own face. Or think of the man who built his persona around strength and competence. He is the one who solves problems, the one who doesn't waver, the one who stays calm in crises. He is proud of this. His relationships have been built on this image of unshakable solidity. But beneath this armor of control, there is a human being who sometimes feels lost, scared, vulnerable. Only he has repressed these feelings for so long that now they are unnameable. He is not hiding weakness. He genuinely believes he has no weakness. The persona of strength is not a lie he consciously tells. It is a lie he believes with such conviction that it has become his truth. Jung observed something disturbing. The more rigid the persona, the more fragile the person. Because maintaining a fixed image of oneself requires constant psychic energy. You have to monitor your words, control your facial expressions, filter your emotions every second. It's like holding your breath forever. It's living in a state of perpetual vigilance. And you don't even realize how tired you are, how exhausted you are by this performance, until someone gives you permission to let go, and you realize you don't even remember how to breathe naturally anymore. You've forgotten what it's like not to be acting. The tragedy of relationships based on personas is that two ghosts are in a relationship. You present your edited version, they present theirs, and you both fall in love, become friends, build a life together. But there's always this uncomfortable feeling that something is missing, an incompleteness that you can't name. And you're right to feel that way, because it is missing. The truth is missing. The real person is missing. You can spend decades with someone and never get past the masks. You can share a house, a bed, children, bills, problems, joys, but always within the safe limits of what is socially presentable, always within the approved script of how civilized people relate to each other. And when someone dares to remove the mask, when someone shows real anger, real vulnerability, real darkness, real need, the relationship enters into crisis. Because there was an unspoken contract, a silent agreement that no one needed to verbalize. We agreed to keep the masks on. You broke the agreement. The persona also serves as a defense against our own complexity. It is much easier to be the organized person than to deal with the internal chaos you carry. It is more comfortable to be the strong person than to face your nighttime fears and daytime insecurities. It is safer to be the positive person than to integrate your deep sadness, your accumulated anger, your silent despair. The persona simplifies. It takes a multifaceted, contradictory, evolving human being, full of nuances and paradoxes, and reduces them to a manageable label, to a definition that fits into a sentence. But human beings are not labels. We are not definitions. We are complex, incoherent, full of contradictory impulses. We are capable of loving and hating the same person, of wanting closeness and distance simultaneously, of being generous and selfish on the same afternoon. And when you try to fit all that living complexity into a narrow, rigid persona, something has to be sacrificed. What you sacrifice is yourself. And so you walk through life carrying this internal division, the person you show to the world, competent, stable, coherent, defined, and the chaos you hide from everyone, including yourself, the doubts you never share, the fears you don't admit, the parts of you that don't make sense within the official narrative of your identity. You feel lonely even when you're with others because no one knows who you really are. How could they? You don't let them. You don't allow it. And maybe you don't even know who that person is anymore beneath all the layers of social construction. Maybe you've worn the mask for so long that you don't know if there's a face underneath. Jung said that the path to individuation, to becoming genuinely yourself, involves consciously recognizing the persona, not to eliminate it completely because you still need it to function socially, but to understand that it is only a part of you, not the whole. It is a tool, not an identity. It is a role you play, not who you essentially are. You can use it when necessary, but without losing yourself in it, without forgetting that there is someone wearing the mask. But here's the fundamental problem. Even if you can recognize your own persona, even if you can consciously separate the mask from the face, that doesn't solve the impossibility of genuine relationships. Because beneath the carefully constructed mask, Jung discovered something even more disturbing. A darkness that you deny so vehemently, so forcefully, that it has become completely invisible even to yourself. There is someone inside you that you don't want to know. A collection of impulses, desires, thoughts, and characteristics that you have repudiated so forcefully that they have been completely expelled from your consciousness. Jung called this the shadow. And this is the part of you that makes genuine love almost impossible. Because how can you connect authentically with another person when you are actively running away from half of yourself? How can you accept the complexity of another when you reject your own? The shadow is not simply your bad parts. It is much more subtle and much more disturbing than that. The shadow is everything about you that doesn't fit into the story you tell about yourself. If you see yourself as a kind and empathetic person, your shadow contains your cruelty and indifference. If you pride yourself on your generosity and altruistic spirit, your shadow holds your deep selfishness and cold calculations. If you identify as rational and controlled, your shadow is wild, emotional, chaotic. Jung discovered this through years of clinical observation and his own painful analysis. People most vehemently insist on denying exactly those qualities that most secretly inhabit them. It's almost a psychological law. The woman who claims to be absolutely honest and who is deeply offended by any lie? Jung would ask, what dishonesty are you denying in yourself? What lies do you tell yourself every day? The man who harshly criticizes the weakness of others, who despises any sign of fragility. What unbearable fragility can you not tolerate in yourself? This is not conscious hypocrisy. It is not deliberate falsehood. It is an ego defense mechanism that operates completely outside of consciousness. You are not deliberately lying about who you are. You genuinely believe in the edited version of yourself that you have constructed over the years. But this belief is only sustained through constant and unconscious repression of everything that contradicts your idealized self-image. And here's where it systematically destroys your relationships. You project your shadow onto others. You see in them the qualities you cannot recognize in yourself. And then you react emotionally to these people, with intense magnetic attraction or visceral repulsion. Not because they really are that way, but because they are serving as a projection screen for your internal psychological movie. They are just a blank canvas onto which you project your own denied content. Think of that friend who irritates you deeply, the one who always needs to be the center of attention, who turns everything into personal drama, who seems incapable of being genuine and spontaneous. Is the intensity of your irritation disproportionate to what they actually do? Probably, because what you see in them is not just them. It is your own repressed need for attention and validation, your own theatricality that you deny, your own difficulty with authenticity that you don't want to face at all. Jung noticed a clear pattern. We become more emotionally triggered by what we have not integrated into ourselves. If you have made peace with your own vanity, you can recognize it without judgment, and the vanity of others does not bother you as much. If you recognize and accept your own capacity for manipulation, for using people, for being strategic with affection, manipulation in others does not shock or offend you. But if you have built your entire identity around being a sincere and transparent person, then any trace of manipulation in others will enrage you disproportionately, because unconsciously you know that you are denying this same ability in yourself. The shadow also includes positive qualities that you have learned to repress. Jung called this the golden shadow. Talents, strengths, natural abilities that you have been taught to hide or deny. Perhaps you grew up in a family environment that punished confidence and assertiveness. So you learned to make yourself small, invisible, harmless. Your golden shadow contains your natural power, your magnetic presence, your ability to take up space without apologizing. You have repressed it so deeply for so many years that now you feel painful envy of those who express it freely. You admire and hate them at the same time. Or perhaps you were raised in an environment that valued only rationality, control, and precocious maturity. So you learned to repress your spontaneity, your childlike joy, your ability to be silly and carefree. Your shadow contains that lightness that you have lost. And when you see someone living with that emotional freedom, you feel contempt mixed with desire. You criticize, but secretly envy. You are seeing something precious that you had to sacrifice in order to survive in your original environment. And so you build entire relationships on top of these unconscious shadow dynamics. You fall in love with someone who freely expresses what you have violently repressed. The shy and restrained person is attracted to the outgoing and expansive person. The overly responsible and controlled person gets involved with someone chaotic, spontaneous, and free. It is no coincidence. It is not inexplicable chemistry. You are unconsciously trying to reconnect with your lost parts through the other. You are trying to live through them what you cannot live in yourself. But that is not real love. That is psychological parasitism disguised as romance. You are using the other person as a repository for the qualities you cannot integrate into yourself. And when they inevitably fail to carry your projected shadow, when they reveal their own contradictions, their own vulnerabilities, their own shadows, you are deeply disappointed. You feel betrayed because you weren't loving them. You were loving the version of them that temporarily completed your fragmented psyche. The uncomfortable truth is that most friendships, romances, and family relationships operate on an unspoken agreement. We agree not to look too deeply. We agree not to remove our masks completely. We agree not to confront our mutual shadows. And as long as everyone keeps to the agreement, as long as no one breaks the silent pact, the relationship seems to work reasonably well. But it is a superficial functionality. It is a peace built on mutual denial and shared blindness. And then inevitably, in moments of extreme crisis, in moments of unbearable stress, the shadow emerges without permission. The always kind and understanding person explodes in frightening and disproportionate anger. The always strong and unshakable person collapses into childish despair. The always positive and optimistic person reveals a bitter and deep cynicism. And everyone around is shocked, as if this person had changed overnight. But Jung would say with his Swiss calm, she hasn't changed. You simply saw what was always there, but which she and you were both denying all along. The impossibility of genuine love for Jung begins right here. You cannot fully love another person if you are in constant civil war with half of yourself. You cannot truly accept the complexity of the other if you do not accept your own. You cannot see someone clearly when you are constantly projecting your unacknowledged dark contents onto them. You are always seeing through a distorted filter of your own denials. And here's the part that hurts the most. The part that is almost impossible to accept. Even if you did the heroic work of recognizing your shadow, of consciously integrating these denied parts of yourself, of making peace with your total complexity, you would still face another, even more fundamental problem. Because Jung discovered something that shakes the foundations of our illusion of individuality. Your thoughts are not really yours. Your desires are not originally yours. Even your most intimate preferences in friendships and loves are largely determined by collective psychological forces that go far beyond your individual will. You believe that your desires are yours, that your choices come from some authentic place within you, that when you decide to be friends with someone, when you feel attracted to a certain person, when you value certain qualities and reject others, all of this comes from your unique individuality. But Jung discovered something that completely shatters this illusion. Most of what you consider to be yourself is actually a collective psychological inheritance that you carry without knowing it. Jung called this the collective unconscious, a layer of the psyche that goes far beyond your personal experience. These are not just memories from your childhood or traumas from your individual history. They are ancestral psychological patterns, inherited mental structures, ways of thinking and feeling that are older than you, older than your family, older than your culture. They are the invisible molds that shape your experience of being alive even before you are aware that you are being shaped. Think about how many times you've had a thought and then found yourself thinking, where did that come from? How many times have you felt an emotion that seemed disproportionate, inappropriate, strange? How many times have you acted in a certain way and then couldn't explain why? Jung would say, you are being inhabited by psychological forces that do not originate in you. You are a channel, not the source. These forces operate through what Jung called archetypes, universal patterns of human behavior that repeat themselves in all cultures, in all eras, in all stories that humanity has ever told. The hero who sets out on a journey, the mother who nurtures or devours, the sage who guides or deceives, the lover who completes or destroys. These are not just characters in stories. They are psychological roles that you unconsciously assume in your relationships. And here's the problem. When an archetype possesses you, you lose your individuality. You begin to act according to an ancient script that millions of other human beings have acted out before you. You think you are making free choices, but you are just repeating old patterns. You are dancing a choreography that was already written before you were born. Look at your friendships. How many of them follow predictable archetypal dynamics? There is always that friend who plays the role of savior, the one everyone turns to when they need help, the one who carries the burdens of others, the one whose entire identity is built on being needed. And there's always the one who is eternally saved, always in crisis, always in need of rescue, always melting down from their inability to sustain themselves emotionally. These are not unique personalities. They are archetypal masks that people wear without realizing it. And the relationship between them is not really a relationship between two individuals. It is the enactment of an ancestral psychological pattern. The savior needs someone to save in order to feel valuable. The victim needs someone to save them so they don't have to take responsibility for themselves. It's an unhealthy symbiosis disguised as deep friendship. Or think about groups of friends. Jung observed that groups always organize themselves according to archetypal structures, regardless of who the people involved are. A leader always emerges, not necessarily the most intelligent or capable, but the one who unconsciously assumes the archetype of the king or queen. There is always the court jester, the one who relieves tension with humor, who is never taken entirely seriously, who sacrifices depth in exchange for acceptance. There is always the rebel, the one who questions, who challenges, who keeps the group honest, but who can also be exiled when they become too inconvenient. These dynamics are not consciously created. They happen because the collective unconscious is operating through people, organizing them according to patterns that have existed for millennia. And what's most disturbing? When you try to step out of the archetypal role you've assumed, the group resists. Because the whole structure depends on each person maintaining their psychological function. If you are the one designated as the strong one, the group will unconsciously sabotage any attempt you make to show vulnerability. If you are the funny one, your attempts at seriousness will be ridiculed or ignored. If you are the rebel, any move toward conformity will be seen as betrayal. The group does not want real individuals. The group wants actors fulfilling predictable archetypal roles. Jung realized that the collective unconscious becomes especially visible during times of intense social pressure. Notice how people who seemed unique and independent suddenly begin to think, speak and act identically during political crises, social movements, or cultural changes. They use the same expressions, have the same emotional reactions, follow the same patterns of behavior, and they all genuinely believe they are thinking for themselves. This happens because archetypes have been activated. The warrior archetype in times of conflict, the judge archetype in times of moral judgment, the prophet archetype in times of change. And when an archetype is activated collectively, millions of people are simultaneously possessed by the same psychological pattern. They become interchangeable. You can substitute one for another and the discourse remains the same. The emotion remains the same. The behavior remains the same. And then you look at your closest relationships and begin to ask, how much of what I feel for this person is really about them? And how much is an archetypal pattern playing itself out through me? Do I love this person? Or do I love the role they play in my psychological economy? Did I choose this friend? Or was I unconsciously drawn to them because they fit perfectly into the archetypal drama I am enacting? Jung observed that we choose friends and partners not because they are who they are, but because they activate certain archetypes within us. The woman who always gets involved with men who need to be fixed is not finding these men by chance. She is unconsciously seeking them out because the archetype of the healer, the savior, the wounded mother needs someone to heal. The man who always seeks friendships with authoritarian figures is not being unlucky. He is seeking an archetypal father figure that he never integrated internally. These are not free choices. They are psychological compulsions disguised as personal preferences. And most tragically, as long as you are possessed by these archetypal patterns, you will never be able to have a genuine relationship because you are not seeing the real person in front of you. You are seeing the projection of an archetypal role that you need them to play in order to keep your own psychological drama going. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, who deeply influenced Jung, had already noticed something similar. He spoke of a blind will that moves all human beings, an irrational, unconscious force that pushes us in directions we do not consciously choose. We don't want things because we decide to want them. We want them because we are possessed by this will that is greater than us, older than us, and that uses our individual consciousness as a puppet. Jung took this further. Schopenhauer's will operates through the archetypes of the collective unconscious. And these archetypes don't care about your individual happiness. They don't care about your authentic relationships. They just want to manifest themselves, to repeat themselves, to perpetuate themselves through you. You are the means, not the end. And here's where it gets truly despairing. If your thoughts are not your own, if your desires are inherited, if your choices are determined by unconscious collective patterns, then who are you? What is left of the individual after you subtract all the archetypal programming, all the collective psychological inheritance, all the roles you have been forced to play? Jung would say, very little. Individuation, The process of becoming truly yourself is rare precisely because it requires you to consciously recognize and separate yourself from these collective patterns. It requires you to stop being an actor in an archetypal drama and start being a real individual. But that is terrifying, because it means giving up the comfort of familiar roles. It means being psychologically alone, without the support of collective structures, and most people don't have the courage to do that. So they continue to play their roles. They continue to choose friends who fit into the archetypal dramas they are acting out. They continue to confuse the activation of ancestral patterns with true love. They continue to believe that their thoughts are their own, when in fact they are echoes of millions of other thoughts that came before. But even if you manage to escape the prison of the collective unconscious, even if you manage to differentiate yourself from the archetypal patterns that possess you, you would still face a final devastating problem. Because even if you knew yourself deeply, even if you integrated your shadow and recognized your archetypes, you still wouldn't be able to see another person clearly. Jung discovered that there is a final psychological mechanism that ensures you will never see anyone as they really are. You have never seen the person you say you love. You have never truly known the friend you have spent years talking to. This is not poetry. It is not philosophical exaggeration. It is the inevitable conclusion of what Jung discovered about the mechanism of projection. And this is where every possibility of genuine love finally collapses. Projection works like this. You take psychological content that belongs to you, unprocessed emotions, unrecognized needs, unintegrated qualities, and unconsciously cast it onto another person. Then you react to these projections as if they were real characteristics of the other person. You turn the other person into a screen onto which you project your own internal movie, and then you relate to the movie, not the person. It's like wearing glasses with distorted lenses and never realizing you're wearing them. Everything you see is contaminated by distortion, but you swear you're seeing reality. And worse, you're absolutely sure that your perception is correct. You may even fight, end relationships, judge entire people based on these projections, and never suspect that you were only seeing distorted reflections of yourself. Jung observed that we project most intensely precisely what we deny most in ourselves. If you have repressed your aggression, you will see aggression in people who are just being assertive. If you have denied your vulnerability, you will interpret simple requests for help as emotional manipulation. If you don't recognize your need for control, you will accuse others of being controlling when they are simply setting boundaries. Think about that friend you completely idealized at first. He seemed perfect, confident, interesting, profound, exactly the kind of person you always wanted to meet. You felt magnetically drawn to him. Every conversation seemed revealing. Every encounter seemed to confirm that you had finally found someone who truly understood you. But what was happening? You were projecting your own unlived qualities onto him. He seemed confident because you denied your own confidence. He seemed deep because you were disconnected from your own depth. He seemed to understand you because you were seeing in him an idealized reflection of what you would like to be. You weren't loving him. You were loving your own projected potentialities. And then inevitably the projection begins to crack. The real person begins to appear beneath the idealized image you have constructed. They do something that contradicts your projection. They show a flaw, an insecurity, a common human pettiness, and you are shocked. You feel betrayed. He has changed, you think. She is no longer the person I knew. But Jung would say, they never changed. You simply stopped projecting. The projection has withdrawn, and now you are seeing the real person, complex, contradictory, imperfect. And this deeply disappoints you because you didn't want a real person. You wanted the container for your projections. You wanted someone to carry the parts of yourself that you cannot integrate. The cycle of idealization and disillusionment that dominates so many relationships is not about people changing. It's about projections being cast and then withdrawn. At first, you project all your golden qualities, everything you admire but can't recognize in yourself. The person seems like a demigod. Then when reality sets in, you withdraw the golden projection and cast the dark one. Now they carry all your denied qualities. And the person who once seemed perfect now seems unbearable. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, captured something of this dynamic when he said that hell is other people. But Jung would understand it differently. Hell is not other people. Hell is that we can never see other people. We can only see our projections onto them. And we live imprisoned in this hell of distorted mirrors, where each person is just another reflective surface for our own unresolved issues. Projection also explains why you always attract the same type of problematic person. You swear that this time will be different. You've chosen someone who seems completely opposite to the previous one. But 6 months later you realize it's the same dynamic, the same conflict, the same disappointment. How is this possible? Because you are projecting the same internal content. You can change the person, change the setting, change the external circumstances, But as long as the internal projection remains active, you will recreate the same dysfunctional relationship with different people. The problem is not with the people you choose. The problem is with what you project onto them. Jung discovered that removing projections is one of the most difficult psychological tasks there is, because it requires you to admit something humiliating. Much of what you know about other people is wrong. Your certainties about who they are, what they feel, why they act in a certain way, all of this may be based on projection, not on real perception. And this is where something Jung considered essential but few have the courage to do comes in: consciously integrating your projections. Recognizing when you are seeing your own unrecognized qualities in the other person. Asking yourself, what does this intense reaction say about me? Instead of, why is this person like this? It is a work of constant internal vigilance. It is questioning your certainties. It is suspecting your own perceptions. It is developing psychological humility, the ability to admit that you may be completely wrong about someone because you were seeing through distorted lenses. But how many people do that? How many relationships survive when both parties commit to this level of brutal honesty with themselves? Jung would say, almost none. Because it's easier, more comfortable, more psychologically safe to continue projecting, to continue blaming the other person, to continue believing that the problem lies outside of you. And it is here, at this exact point of recognizing our fundamental blindness, that we need to pause. Because if you've come this far and are beginning to feel the weight of this truth, that perhaps you've never really known anyone, that perhaps all your relationships have been based on mutual projections, then you are ready for something that can help you on this impossible but necessary journey of self-knowledge. There is a method I have developed specifically to help people begin the work that Jung considered essential. Recognizing your projections, integrating your shadows, consciously separating what is yours from what you project onto others. It is called the Codes of the White Rabbit, and it is a practical system of psychological integration that translates Jungian insights into concrete exercises that you can do on your own, at your own pace. It is not therapy. It is not a magic solution. It is a tool, a structured way to start asking different questions about yourself, to start seeing the patterns you repeat without realizing it, to start consciously removing the projections that keep you stuck in superficial and unsatisfying relationships. If you feel tired of repeating the same mistakes, of being disappointed by the same people, of never achieving the depth you seek in relationships, this could be the first real step towards something different. The link is in the description. But let's get back to the fundamental problem. Because even with all the tools, even with all the self-knowledge, Jung had no optimistic illusions. He knew that what he was revealing about human nature was devastating. And now you have to face the hardest conclusion of all. If you've never really seen another person, if all your relationships have been based on projections, masks, and unintegrated shadows, then what does that mean about the love you thought you felt? About the friendships you thought you had? About all the connections you believed to be real? There comes a moment when all the layers of illusion are stripped away. The persona is recognized as a mask. The shadow is seen as the denied half of yourself. The collective unconscious is revealed as the psychological puppet strings that move your choices. Projection is exposed as the mechanism that ensures you have never seen anyone clearly. And then you stand naked before a truth you can no longer deny. You are fundamentally alone. You always have been. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher whom Jung read with reverence, called this despair. Not the superficial emotional despair of a bad day, but the ontological despair of realizing that you are eternally separated from all other human beings. That no matter how hard you try, how much love you offer, how much vulnerability you show, there is an unbridgeable chasm between you and anyone else. This recognition is not depression. It is lucidity. It is the end of a childhood fantasy that we all secretly carry. The fantasy of complete fusion with another human being. The fantasy of being fully known, fully understood, fully accepted. The fantasy that there is someone out there who will look inside you and say, I see who you really are and it's okay. Jung knew that this fantasy of fusion is a psychological residue of childhood, that brief period when you and your mother were psychologically indistinguishable, when your needs were met before they were even named, when there was the illusion that another human being could complete you. But you grew up, and growing up, psychologically speaking, is precisely realizing that you are an island of consciousness separate from all other islands. People spend their entire lives trying to build bridges between these islands. They build relationships, families, communities, desperately trying to overcome fundamental existential loneliness. And there are moments when they seem to succeed, moments of deep intimacy, of true connection, where you feel that you are finally no longer alone. But Jung would not let you hold on to that illusion for long, because even in these moments of apparent fusion, each person is having their own completely private internal experience. You may be hugging someone, feeling that you are finally no longer isolated, but you are having your experience of connection and they are having theirs. And these two experiences will never be identical. They will never be fully shared. Each remains trapped inside their own skull, inside their own non-transferable subjectivity. This is not cynicism. It is simply the structure of human consciousness. You have no direct access to another person's internal experience. You can only infer, imagine, project. And all these inferences are contaminated by your own experiences, your own limitations, your own blind spots. You never leave yourself. You can get close to someone, but there is always an invisible glass separating you. And here's what makes it even more painful. You may be in a decades-long relationship. You may have raised children together. You may have shared a home, a bed, problems, joys, and yet carry within you thoughts and feelings that have never been shared. Parts of you that remain completely unknown to the person who sleeps next to you every night. Not because you are deliberately hiding them, but because there are aspects of internal experience that are fundamentally incommunicable. Kierkegaard had a disturbing image for this. He said that every human being lives in a kind of solitary confinement and that we spend our lives banging on the walls of that prison, trying to make contact with the prisoners in the cells next door. Sometimes we hear an echo, a response, and that comforts us momentarily. But we never leave our cell. We never directly touch the other person. Jung took this idea further and made it even more disturbing, because he realized that it is not only the structure of consciousness that isolates us, it is also all the psychological mechanisms we have discussed. The persona ensures that you never show who you really are. The shadow ensures that you deny half of yourself. The collective unconscious ensures that you are possessed by patterns you did not choose. And projection ensures that you never see the other clearly. So you are a stranger to yourself, living in a society of other strangers, all wearing masks, all projecting their inner movies onto each other, all possessed by forces they don't understand. And you call this friendship, love, family. But it is a tragic comedy of mutual misunderstandings and parallel solitudes that never truly touch. The hardest part to accept is that you already knew this. You always knew, somewhere quiet and deep in your consciousness, that something was fundamentally wrong in your relationships, that there was a distance that was never crossed, that there was a loneliness that was never alleviated, no matter how many people were around you. Have you ever had that moment? Perhaps lying next to someone who supposedly loves you, feeling completely isolated. Have you ever had that feeling at family gatherings, surrounded by people who have known you for decades, feeling that no one there has the slightest idea who you really are? Have you ever had that experience of being at a party, laughing and talking, and suddenly being hit by such an intense wave of loneliness that you had to leave? These weren't aberrations. They weren't signs that something was wrong with you or with these specific people. They were moments of lucidity. Moments when all your psychological defenses briefly dropped and you saw the truth. You are alone. You have always been alone. And most of what you call relationships are just elaborate, doomed attempts to deny this fundamental loneliness. Jung offered no easy comfort here. He didn't say, but if you find the right person, or but if you are more authentic. He knew that existential loneliness is not a problem to be solved. It is a structural condition of human consciousness. It is the price we pay for being separate individuals, for having private subjectivity, for existing as islands of experience that can never completely merge with other islands. And the more you mature psychologically, the more you become aware of yourself, the lonelier you become. Because individuation, the process of becoming genuinely yourself, involves differentiating yourself from collective patterns, separating yourself from social expectations, distancing yourself from automatic identifications. You become more unique, more yourself, and therefore more isolated. Kierkegaard called this the despair of being oneself, the terrible awareness that the more you are genuinely yourself, the less you are understandable to others, the less you fit in, the less you can relate superficially. Jung would agree. The person who has done the work of psychological integration is condemned to a deeper form of loneliness, because now they can no longer pretend. They can no longer wear social masks unconsciously. They can no longer lose themselves in comfortable collective identifications. They are awake. And to be psychologically awake is to be alone in a way that most people never experience. It is to see clearly the dance of illusions that everyone calls a relationship and no longer be able to participate in it with the same comforting unconsciousness. But here's something strange that Jung observed. There is a freedom in this acknowledged loneliness. When you stop demanding that the other complete you, when you stop expecting someone to know you fully, when you accept the insurmountable distance between consciousnesses, something new becomes possible. It's not the fusion you always wanted. It's not the completeness you were promised, but it's something more honest, more real, perhaps even more beautiful in its tragedy. Then we come to the most paradoxical point of all that Jung discovered. After exposing all the mechanisms that make genuine love almost impossible, after revealing the masks, the shadows, the archetypes, the projections, the structural loneliness, he did not conclude that we should give up on human relationships. He discovered something more subtle and more disturbing. Love only becomes possible when you fully accept its impossibility. Let that sink in for a moment, because it's contradictory enough to make your mind stumble. How can love be possible precisely when you recognize that it will never be complete? How can connection happen when you accept the insurmountable distance? How can you truly love someone when you know you will never know them completely? Jung's answer is devastating in its simplicity. You stop demanding the impossible. You stop demanding that the other person complete you. You stop expecting someone to fill the existential void that lives within you. You stop projecting your unmet needs onto another person and then blaming them for not satisfying them. You stop using relationships as an escape from your own incompleteness. And when you stop demanding the impossible, something strange happens. You finally get to see the person in front of you, not the idealized version, not the projection of your desires, not the archetypal role you needed them to play, but the real person, as lost as you, as fragmented as you, as lonely as you. And there is a devastating tenderness in that recognition. Jung called this individuation in relationships, when two individuals who have done the work of consciously getting to know themselves can finally meet without the need for fusion. It's not the romantic love they sold you. It's not the soulmate who will complete you. It's not the friendship that will save you from loneliness. It's something much more modest and paradoxically much deeper. It is two lonely people recognizing each other's loneliness. It is two masks that know they are masks, but choose to momentarily let them fall, knowing they can never be without them permanently. It is two shadows that see each other and decide not to run away. It is a kind of love that does not promise completeness, but offers something rarer: witness. Witnessing is different from total understanding. Total understanding is fantasy. The idea that someone can completely enter your subjective experience and know exactly what you feel. Witnessing is more humble. It is saying, I cannot know exactly what you are feeling, but I see that you are feeling. I see your struggle. I see your attempt. And I remain here, not because I can save you, but because I recognize in you the same impossible battle that I wage with myself. Martin Heidegger, the existentialist philosopher whom Jung respected, spoke about Mitzin, being with others, but he was clear. This being with is never fusion. It is always a closeness that maintains distance. It is being together while remaining separate. And he said that authenticity in relationships comes precisely from recognizing this structure, not from denying it. Jung would take this further. Mature love is not about overcoming separation. It is about honoring separation while choosing closeness. It is saying, I know you are a mystery I will never completely decipher. I know there are parts of you that will remain forever foreign to me. And yet I choose to stay, not because you complete me, but because your company in this shared solitude makes existence a little less heavy. This sounds less romantic than the love stories you've been told, because it is, but it's infinitely more honest. And perhaps in the end, it's more beautiful precisely because it's honest. There is dignity in loving someone without impossible expectations. There is grace in allowing the other person to be as imperfect, as complex, as contradictory as you yourself are. This form of love requires something that few people have: psychological maturity, the ability to hold the tension between closeness and separation without trying to forcefully resolve that tension, the ability to love without possessing, to connect without merging, to care without losing yourself, to be present without demanding constant presence in return. Jung observed that this maturity only comes after you have done the work of internal integration, after you have recognized your personas and learned to use them consciously instead of being used by them, after you have integrated your shadow and stopped projecting your denied parts onto others, after you have recognized the archetypes that possess you and created space for conscious choices, after you have learned to identify and withdraw your projections before reacting to them as if they were reality. This work is long, it is painful, it is lonely, because you need to descend alone into the depths of your own psyche and face everything that is there. The ugly, the scary, the shameful, the unacceptable. You need to become your own parent, embracing the parts that your real parents fail to embrace. You need to make peace with your own complexity before you can accept someone else's complexity. And here's what's brutally honest about it. Most people never do this work. They prefer to stay in the fantasy. They prefer to continue demanding that the other person complete them. They prefer to continue jumping from relationship to relationship, always hoping that the next person will be different, that the next person will finally fill the void. And then they are confused when each relationship repeats the same dysfunctional patterns. But for those rare ones who do the work, who descend into the hell of their own psyche and emerge more conscious, more integrated, more whole, even in their incompleteness. Something new becomes possible. Not fairy tale love, but a more robust, more resilient, more real kind of love. It is love that can hold the truth of the other without needing to fix it. It is love that can witness the pain of the other without trying to erase it. It is love that can see the contradictions, the inconsistencies, the flaws, and choose to remain not in spite of them, but with them, recognizing that these flaws are just the normal texture of being human. It is love that does not need eternal promises because it is fully present in the moment. It is love that is not offended by the other's need for space because it deeply understands its own need for solitude. It is love that does not interpret the other's complexity as betrayal because it recognizes that complexity itself is not betrayal. It is simply the human condition. Jung would say that this kind of love is extremely rare, not because people are incapable of it, but because few are willing to pay the price it demands, letting go of the fantasy of completeness, letting go of the idea that there is someone out there who will finally make you feel whole, letting go of the belief that love should be easy, natural, without conscious effort. This love requires constant conscious presence. It requires you to be aware of your projections in real time. It requires you to constantly ask yourself, is what I'm feeling about them or about me? It requires you to take responsibility for your own emotional completeness instead of outsourcing it to someone else. It's work that never ends. But for those willing to do that work, Jung promised something. Not guaranteed happiness, not a happy ending, but the possibility of genuine encounters between real human beings. Brief, imperfect, incomplete, but true in a way that most successful relationships never are. And maybe in the end, that's what you always wanted. Not the fantasy, but the reality. Not the illusion of being known completely, but the rare experience of being seen, even if only partially, even if imperfectly, by someone who has also made the journey down into their own depths and come back willing to try. Then you reach the end of this disturbing journey into the human psyche and realize something Jung always knew. There is no final solution to the problem of existential loneliness and the impossibility of complete love. There is only the choice between living consciously with this truth or continuing to sleep in illusion. Most choose illusion, and there is no judgment in that. Living in truth is heavy. It is tiring. It is waking up every day knowing that you will never be fully understood, that your relationships will always have an element of insurmountable distance, that love will never be what you were promised it would be. It is carrying a lucidity that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. But you who are here, who have gone through this exploration of the deepest layers of human psychology with me, you can no longer turn back. Knowledge cannot be unknown. Consciousness cannot be erased. You can try to repress it again. You can try to pretend you don't know what you now know. But something inside you will resist, because you have touched something true. And truth has a weight that comfortable illusions can no longer sustain. Kierkegaard had a devastating phrase: the door to happiness opens outward. What he meant is that you don't find meaning by trying to grab things, trying to hold on to people, control relationships, demand security. You find meaning by letting go, by giving up, by accepting the fundamental precariousness of all human connection. Jung would agree. Individuation, the process of becoming genuinely yourself, is not about adding things to your life. It's about subtracting. Subtracting the masks that are not yours. Subtracting the expectations you have unconsciously absorbed. Subtracting the projections you cast onto others. Subtracting the identification with archetypal roles you never consciously chose to play. And what is left after all these subtractions? A conscious loneliness, but a loneliness that paradoxically is at peace with itself. It is not the desperate loneliness of someone who feels abandoned. It is the mature loneliness of someone who recognizes that they have always been alone, that they will always be alone on some fundamental level, and that this is not a tragedy. It is simply the structure of conscious existence. There is a stark difference between unconscious loneliness and conscious loneliness. Unconscious loneliness hurts because you are still fighting it, still trying to deny it through desperate relationships, still waiting for someone to come and save you from it. Conscious loneliness is different. It is when you stop fighting, when you recognize, I am alone, I always have been, and that's okay. And in that recognition, something strange happens. Loneliness ceases to be an enemy and becomes territory, an inner space you can inhabit without fear, a place from which you can finally relate to others without the desperate urgency to escape yourself through them. This does not mean that you become cold or distant. On the contrary, it means that you can finally love without desperation. You can finally connect without clinging. You can finally be present with others because you are no longer trying to use them as an escape from yourself. Jung observed that the people most capable of genuine intimacy were precisely those who had made peace with their own loneliness because they didn't need the other. And this absence of desperate need created space for something more beautiful: free choice. Not "I need you to complete me," but "I choose to be with you even though I am already complete in my incompleteness." And here is the last insight, the most difficult of all to accept. You were never really loved the way you dreamed, because that way never existed. The love you were promised, the one that completes you, that understands you totally, that fills all the voids, is a fantasy. It always has been. It was a beautiful story we told ourselves to make existence more bearable, but it's not real. Real love is much less grandiose and much more humble. It is two imperfect beings acknowledging their mutual imperfection and deciding to try anyway. It is waking up next to someone and knowing that they will never completely understand you, but choosing to stay because there is something precious in the shared attempt. It is forgiving the other's limitations because you have finally forgiven your own. You don't have to blame yourself for all the times you failed to love perfectly. You don't have to blame yourself for all the times you disappointed someone or were disappointed. Because you were all trying to do something impossible. You were trying to find completeness outside of yourselves. You were trying to use relationships to escape the fundamental human condition. And that attempt was doomed to failure not because you were inadequate, but because the task itself was impossible from the start. There is a brutal freedom in accepting this. You stop punishing yourself for not achieving the impossible. You stop punishing others for failing to give you what no one can give you. You stop chasing the next person, the next relationship, hoping that this time will be different. And you settle into the reality of what is possible. Moments of genuine connection between two conscious solitudes that recognize each other. It's not what you wanted when you started looking for love, but it's what's real. And maybe over time, you'll find that it's enough. That these brief moments of being seen, even if only partially, by another human being who is also trying to navigate the impossibility of existence are worth all the pain of accepting that full love will never come. The first practical step is not to go out and look for more authentic relationships. The first step is to go back inside. It is to begin the work Jung really suggested, to know your own masks, to integrate your own shadow, to recognize the archetypes that possess you, to learn to identify your projections before casting them onto others. And this work, you do it alone. It is solitary by nature, because no one can descend into your psychological hell for you. No one can integrate your fragmented parts for you. No one can make you grow. You have to choose to do that, and most don't choose to. Most prefer to continue blaming others, changing partners, hoping that life will magically improve without them having to change internally. But you who have come this far, maybe you are different. Maybe you are finally ready to stop looking for completeness outside and start building it inside. Not the impossible completeness of having no more wounds, but the completeness of recognizing all your parts, even the ugly ones, even the scary ones, and embracing them as your own. When Jung was old near death, someone asked him if he believed in God. He replied, "I don't believe, I know." And when they asked him what he knew, he said something like, "I know that there is a force within every human being that is trying to become conscious, to integrate, to individuate. Call it what you will. Soul, self, inner God. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that you have a choice, to collaborate with this force or to resist it. To resist is to continue sleeping. It is to continue blaming others for your loneliness. It is to continue waiting for someone to save you. To collaborate is to wake up. It is to take responsibility for your own psychological journey. It is to do the work that no one can do for you. And maybe, just maybe, after you do that work, after you descend into your own depths and emerge more whole even in your incompleteness, you will find another human being who has also made that journey. And you two, knowing each other's fundamental loneliness, can sit together in that loneliness. Not fused, not complete, but present. Witnessing each other's impossible and beautiful attempt to be alive. What if you never find that person? What if you do all the work and still end up alone in the conventional sense? Jung would say, you will still have gained something invaluable. You will have gained yourself. And in the end, that is all you can truly possess in this life. Not others, not guaranteed love, not eternal security, just yourself, known, integrated, conscious. So let me ask you directly, of the people you love, how many really know who you are beneath the masks? And more importantly, are you ready to start getting to know yourself? If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the white rabbit.